I understand that you need your space, but we're supposed to be building a life together, I said to my husband Marcus as he stood with his back to me in our luxurious Seattle apartment, staring out at the rain-soaked streets of Capitol Hill below. The silence between us had become suffocating, a thick wall of indifference that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. It had been 4 months since our wedding, and Marcus hadn't shown me any real affection since we returned from what was supposed to be our romantic honeymoon in the picturesque Napa Valley. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and at 29, I thought I had finally found the man of my dreams, when Marcus Thompson swept me off my feet during a chance encounter at Pike Place Market 9 months ago. I had been browsing the flower stalls on a crisp October morning, enjoying the vibrant colors and fragrant blooms, when this incredibly handsome man approached me with a charming smile and offered to buy me the bouquet I had been admiring. He was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, with perfectly styled dark hair, piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right into my soul, and the kind of confident demeanor that immediately made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. Marcus claimed to work as a senior technology consultant for various high-profile startups around the Seattle metropolitan area, specializing in digital transformation and strategic planning for emerging companies. He dressed impeccably in expensive suits, drove a sleek black BMW, and always seemed to have plenty of money despite giving only vague explanations about his specific clients and projects. When I asked about his work, he would smile mysteriously and say something about non-disclosure agreements and the need to protect client confidentiality in the competitive tech industry. Our whirlwind romance felt like something out of a fairy tale. Marcus would surprise me with expensive dinners at the most exclusive restaurants in Seattle, take me to weekend getaways in charming bed and breakfasts throughout the Pacific Northwest, and shower me with thoughtful gifts that showed he had been paying careful attention to my interests and preferences. He seemed genuinely fascinated by my work as a marketing director for a successful environmental consulting firm, my close relationship with my family, and my passion for hiking and outdoor photography. When he proposed to me after just 6 months of dating, presenting a stunning 3-carat diamond ring at the top of Mount Rainier during a supposedly spontaneous hiking trip, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. The proposal was everything I had ever dreamed of, romantic and personal, and perfectly tailored to my love of nature and adventure. Marcus had even arranged for a professional photographer to secretly capture the moment, claiming he wanted to preserve the memory forever. Our wedding ceremony at the prestigious Fairmont Olympic Hotel was everything I had envisioned since childhood. A beautiful celebration with over 200 guests, including my entire extended family, college friends, and colleagues who all agreed that Marcus was absolutely perfect for me. He had insisted on paying for most of the wedding expenses, claiming that his successful consulting business was doing incredibly well and that he wanted to give me the wedding of my dreams. My parents were impressed by his generosity and his apparent devotion to making me happy. But standing in our elegantly furnished bedroom that rainy November evening, watching him scroll through his phone with the same detached expression he wore whenever I tried to connect with him emotionally or physically, I knew something was fundamentally and devastatingly wrong with my marriage. The loving, attentive man who had courted me so passionately had vanished completely the moment we signed our marriage certificate. Elena, we've discussed this multiple times, Marcus replied without turning around, his voice carrying that familiar note of irritation that had become his default tone whenever I tried to address the growing distance between us. Not everyone expresses love and affection in the same way. Just because I don't constantly need physical contact doesn't mean I don't care about you or our relationship. The words stung because they contained just enough psychological truth to make me doubt my own perceptions and question whether I was being unreasonable or overly demanding. During our passionate courtship, Marcus had been incredibly romantic and physically affectionate. He would surprise me with flowers delivered to my office, take me to expensive restaurants where he would hold my hand across candlelit tables and spend hours talking about our future together, painting vivid pictures of the life we would build as husband and wife. He seemed genuinely excited about marriage, often bringing up wedding plans during our dates and discussing in detail the beautiful apartment we would share, the vacations we would take, and even the children we might have someday. He would tell me how much he loved my laugh, how beautiful I looked in the morning light, and how lucky he felt to have found someone who understood and appreciated him so completely. But the moment we returned from our honeymoon in Napa Valley, where he had claimed exhaustion and work stress every single night when I tried to initiate any kind of physical intimacy, he became a completely different person. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, transforming the passionate, romantic man I had married into a cold, distant stranger who seemed annoyed by my very presence in our shared living space. Marcus, married couples share physical and emotional intimacy, I said, my voice growing stronger as I found the courage to articulate what had been bothering me for months. We don't even hold hands anymore when we watch movies together. You flinch visibly when I try to touch you or kiss you goodnight. You sleep as far away from me as possible in our king-size bed. This isn't normal behavior for newlyweds. He finally turned to face me, his striking blue eyes cold and distant, in a way that made me feel like I was looking at a complete stranger, rather than the man I had pledged to love and honor for the rest of my life. Normal is respecting personal boundaries, Elena. Normal is not pressuring your spouse into physical contact they're not comfortable with at any given moment. I thought you understood that mutual consent and respect matter in marriage just as much as they do in any other relationship. His words were technically and psychologically correct, which made them even more frustrating and confusing. Of course, consent mattered in marriage. Of course, personal boundaries were important and should be respected. But something felt deeply and fundamentally wrong about the way he was using these perfectly reasonable concepts to create an impenetrable wall of distance between us. The Marcus who had courted me with such passion and determination, who had seemed desperate to marry me and start our life together, who had spoken so eloquently about the physical and emotional intimacy he was looking forward to sharing with me as his wife, had disappeared completely the moment we signed the marriage certificate. It was as if he had been playing a role during our entire courtship, and now that he had achieved his goal of marrying me, he no longer felt the need to maintain the performance. As he walked past me toward the bathroom, dismissing our conversation with a casual wave of his hand, I made a decision that would ultimately change both of our lives forever. Something was very wrong with my marriage, and I was going to find out exactly what Marcus was hiding from me, no matter what it took or how much it might hurt to learn the truth. The next morning, I sat at our expensive marble kitchen table watching Marcus go through his elaborate and seemingly obsessive morning routine. Everything he did appeared calculated and precise, from the way he arranged his various papers and devices in specific patterns to the exact order in which he checked his multiple phones and reviewed his daily schedule. His behavior had always been organized and methodical, but lately, his routines felt almost compulsive, like he was following a carefully rehearsed script. Marcus carried 3 different smartphones with him at all times, claiming they were absolutely necessary for his consulting work with different clients who required separate communication channels for security and confidentiality purposes. He would check each device multiple times throughout the morning, sometimes stepping into his home office or onto our balcony to take calls that he claimed were too sensitive to discuss in front of anyone else, even his own wife. "I'm thinking about visiting my mother in Portland this weekend," I announced casually, studying his reaction carefully while pretending to focus on my morning coffee and the newspaper. "She's been asking when I'm going to come see her new apartment, and I thought it might be nice to spend some quality time together." Marcus paused for just a fraction of a second before nodding, but I noticed that his shoulders seemed to relax slightly, and something that looked almost like relief flickered across his handsome features. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. How long are you planning to stay?" "Just Saturday and Sunday. I'll drive down Saturday morning and come back Sunday evening. Will you miss me while I'm gone?" He shrugged without looking up from his coffee and his phone, his attention already seeming to drift elsewhere. "I'll keep busy with some important work projects that have been piling up. You know how demanding my clients can be." The casual dismissal of my absence should have hurt my feelings, but instead it confirmed the growing suspicions that had been nagging at me for weeks. Marcus seemed genuinely relieved whenever I left the apartment for extended periods, whether for work trips, visits with friends, or family obligations. During our passionate courtship, he had texted me constantly when we were apart, claiming he missed me terribly, even after just a few hours of separation and counting down the minutes until we could be together again. He used to send me sweet messages throughout the day, photos of things that reminded him of me, and lengthy voice messages describing how much he was looking forward to seeing me again. Now, he practically encouraged my absence, suggesting additional activities I could do while I was away, and never asking when exactly I planned to return home. I watched him carefully as he prepared for another day of his mysterious consulting work, noting the expensive clothes, the confident demeanor, and the way he seemed to have unlimited financial resources, despite his vague explanations about his income sources. Marcus was undeniably attractive and successful looking, with the kind of polished appearance and sophisticated manner that had initially drawn me to him like a magnet. He dressed in perfectly tailored suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries, wore an expensive Rolex watch that caught the light whenever he gestured, and drove a luxury BMW that he claimed was a necessary business expense for maintaining his professional image with high-profile clients. He always seemed to have plenty of money for expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, and costly gifts. But whenever I asked specific questions about his income or his business success, he would deflect with vague comments about the unpredictable nature of consulting work. "Marcus," I said carefully, choosing my words with deliberate precision, "I've been thinking that we should consider seeing a marriage counselor together. This emotional and physical distance between us isn't healthy for our relationship, and I think it would help us communicate better and understand each other's needs." His head snapped up sharply, and for just a moment, I saw something intense flash across his face. It might have been fear, panic, or anger, but the expression was gone so quickly that I wondered if I had imagined it or misinterpreted his reaction. "We absolutely don't need counseling," he said firmly, his voice taking on a tone of authority that brooked no disagreement. "We just need more time to adjust to living together and sharing our lives. Marriage is a huge transition for everyone, and not all couples find their rhythm immediately. These things take time and patience." "It's been 4 months since our wedding," I reminded him, trying to keep my voice level and reasonable. "Most couples don't struggle with basic physical affection for this long, especially when they were so compatible during their engagement period." "4 months is absolutely nothing in the context of a lifetime partnership," he replied, but his voice sounded oddly rehearsed, like he had practiced this response multiple times in front of a mirror. "You're being impatient and putting unnecessary pressure on both of us to conform to some artificial timeline that doesn't reflect the reality of how relationships actually develop and mature." That afternoon, after Marcus left for what he claimed was an important client meeting in the affluent Bellevue area across Lake Washington, I did something I never thought I would be capable of doing. I systematically searched through his personal belongings, not out of jealousy or possessiveness, but out of a growing conviction that my husband was hiding something significant from me, something that might explain the dramatic change in his behavior since our wedding. Marcus's home office was immaculately organized, almost suspiciously so, as if it had been carefully staged to present a particular image rather than reflecting the natural chaos of a busy consultant's working life. His mahogany desk drawers contained only basic office supplies arranged with military precision. His expensive filing cabinet held generic business documents that could have belonged to any professional, and his state-of-the-art computer system was protected by multiple passwords and security measures that I had no way of bypassing. But as I was about to abandon my search, feeling guilty and invasive, I noticed something odd in the small wicker trash basket beside his desk. Partially buried beneath other discarded papers was a boarding pass stub for a round-trip flight from Seattle to Phoenix, dated from 3 weeks ago, when Marcus had claimed to be attending a critical business conference in Vancouver, Canada, to meet with potential clients about a major consulting contract. The airline ticket was for a same-day turnaround flight, leaving Seattle early in the morning and returning late the same evening. Attached to the boarding pass with a small paperclip was a restaurant receipt from a place called Romantic Sunset Bistro in Phoenix, Arizona. The receipt showed dinner for 2 people, with expensive wine and dessert, and there was a handwritten note in Marcus's distinctive handwriting that read, "Happy anniversary, my beautiful love." My hands began to shake uncontrollably as I carefully photographed the evidence with my smartphone, making sure to capture every detail of both the boarding pass and the restaurant receipt. Whatever Marcus was hiding from me, whatever he was doing during his supposed business trips, I was determined to find out the truth. The man I had married was clearly living a lie, and I deserved to know what was really happening in my own marriage. That evening, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I was going to follow Marcus and see for myself where he went and what he did when he claimed to be working with clients. I needed to understand why he seemed like a completely different person when he thought no one was watching, and why his behavior had changed so dramatically since our wedding day. I followed Marcus from our apartment building that evening, staying several cars behind as he navigated through Seattle's heavy rush hour traffic. Instead of heading toward the Bellevue area, where he claimed to have important client meetings, he drove to a modern office building in downtown Seattle and parked in the visitor section of the attached parking garage. From my concealed position across the street, I had a clear view through the building's large windows as Marcus entered what appeared to be a trendy co-working space filled with young professionals working on laptops at communal tables. He didn't go to any specific office or meet with any identifiable clients. Instead, he found an empty desk in a corner, opened his expensive laptop computer, and spent the next 2.5 hours appearing to work diligently while frequently checking his multiple phones and making lengthy calls. The most revealing part of my surveillance was observing Marcus's dramatically different body language during his various phone conversations. When he talked on what appeared to be his business phone, he seemed tense, professional, and somewhat distracted, as if he was going through the motions of conducting routine business calls. But when he switched to one of his personal phones, His entire demeanor underwent a complete transformation. During these personal calls, Marcus would smile broadly, laugh heartily, and gesture animatedly with his free hand, like he was having the most wonderful and engaging conversations of his life. These calls would sometimes last for 45 minutes or more, and throughout them, Marcus looked happier, more relaxed, and more genuinely animated than I had ever seen him during our time together as husband and wife. He would lean back in his chair, run his fingers through his dark hair, and sometimes even stand up to pace around his temporary workspace while continuing these obviously intimate conversations. At one point, I saw him pull out a small photograph from his wallet and smile at it tenderly while he talked, holding it like it was something precious and meaningful. When he finally concluded his work session and prepared to leave the co-working space, Marcus threw away what appeared to be fake paperwork and dummy documents, as if he had been creating the illusion of productivity rather than engaging in actual business activities. He seemed relaxed and satisfied as he drove home, like someone who had just spent a pleasant evening doing exactly what he wanted to do. I followed him at a safe distance, my mind racing with questions and disturbing possibilities. Why was Marcus pretending to have legitimate client meetings when he was actually just sitting in a public co-working space? Who was he having those lengthy, intimate phone conversations with, and why did those calls make him happier than anything in his life with me? What was in the photograph that made him smile so tenderly, and why had I never seen it before? When I arrived home about 15 minutes after Marcus, carefully timing my return to avoid suspicion, he was already in the shower, humming softly to himself in a way that indicated he was in an exceptionally good mood. I seized this opportunity to examine his personal phones, which he had left charging on the nightstand in our bedroom, something he rarely did when I was home. The first phone was protected by a complex passcode that I had no way of guessing, but when I tried our wedding date on the second device, it unlocked immediately. What I discovered in his text messages made my blood run cold, and my hands tremble so violently that I could barely continue reading. Message after message with someone named Jessica, filled with intimate conversations, romantic declarations, and expressions of love that were more passionate and detailed than anything Marcus had ever said to me, even during the height of our courtship. The messages revealed a relationship that was clearly sexual, emotional, and deeply committed, with references to shared experiences, inside jokes, and future plans that had nothing to do with me or our marriage. There were hundreds of photos of Marcus with a strikingly beautiful woman I had never seen before, both wearing what appeared to be wedding rings, standing together in front of various romantic locations throughout Phoenix, Arizona. They looked blissfully happy in every image, gazing at each other with the kind of love and adoration that I had thought Marcus felt for me during our engagement. The most recent message, sent just 2 hours earlier while Marcus was supposedly working at his client meeting, read, "Can't wait to see you this weekend, my darling. This whole complicated situation in Seattle is almost finished according to plan. Soon we can be together properly and permanently, just like we've always dreamed." The shower was still running when I quickly forwarded the most damaging photos and incriminating text messages to my own phone, then carefully returned Marcus's device to its exact position on the charging station. My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely operate my own smartphone as I stared at the overwhelming evidence of what appeared to be my husband's complete double life. When Marcus emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, wrapped in his expensive bathrobe and humming softly to himself, he seemed genuinely happy and relaxed for the first time in months. His mood was so obviously improved that it was almost painful to witness, especially now that I understood the reason behind his contentment. He was living 2 completely separate lives, maintaining what appeared to be his real relationship in Phoenix, while treating his marriage to me as some kind of temporary inconvenience or business arrangement that served a purpose I didn't yet understand. Apparently his life with me was the one he wanted to end as quickly as possible so he could return to his genuine happiness with Jessica. "I think I'll go to bed early tonight," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral and trying not to reveal any of the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. "I'm feeling pretty tired, and I want to get a good night's sleep before my trip to Portland this weekend." "That's probably a good idea," Marcus replied, and I definitely didn't miss the obvious relief in his tone. "You've been working hard lately, and you deserve some rest. Sweet dreams, Elena." As I lay in the darkness, listening to his steady, peaceful breathing beside me, feeling like I was sharing my bed with a complete stranger who had somehow stolen my husband's identity, I made a decision that would ultimately destroy both of our lives in very different ways. Tomorrow, I would contact a divorce attorney and find out exactly who I had married and what legal options were available to me. The prestigious law office of Robert Chen was located in a gleaming modern building overlooking Elliott Bay, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered spectacular panoramic views of the Olympic Mountains and Puget Sound. I had chosen Robert specifically because of his excellent reputation for handling complex divorce cases and his extensive experience with marriage fraud, financial deception, and other legal issues that seemed to match my increasingly complicated situation. But as I sat across from his impressive mahogany desk, methodically sharing the evidence I had painstakingly gathered over the past several weeks, I began to realize that I was dealing with something far more serious and potentially criminal than a simple extramarital affair or even a garden variety case of marriage fraud. "Elena," Robert said, his voice taking on a grave and concerned tone, as he carefully studied the incriminating photos and text messages on my smartphone, "what you're showing me strongly suggests potential bigamy, which isn't just grounds for divorce. This could constitute a serious federal crime with significant legal consequences for your husband." The word bigamy hit me like a physical blow, leaving me feeling dizzy and disoriented. I had suspected Marcus was having an affair, and I had even considered the possibility that he had married me for financial reasons or as part of some elaborate deception. But the idea that he was already legally married to someone else, that our entire wedding ceremony and marriage certificate might be fraudulent, had never seriously occurred to me. "That's completely impossible," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I struggled to process this new information. "We have a valid marriage certificate signed by a licensed officiant. We were married in a beautiful ceremony at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel with over 200 witnesses, including my entire family and all of our friends. How could that not be legal?" Robert nodded grimly, his expression reflecting years of experience with similar cases. "Your marriage ceremony was certainly real, and your marriage certificate is legally valid from your perspective, which actually makes Marcus's situation extremely problematic if he's already married to someone else. Bigamy is a serious federal crime that carries substantial penalties, especially when it's connected to financial fraud or other criminal activities." He reached for his office phone with a sense of urgency. "I'm going to strongly recommend that we hire a qualified private investigator immediately to conduct a thorough investigation. We need to determine if this Jessica person is actually Marcus's legal wife, and if so, when and where they were married. We also need to investigate his financial activities, his employment claims, and any other aspects of his identity that might be fraudulent." Within just a few hours, I found myself in the well-appointed office of Detective Sarah Mitchell, a former FBI special agent who had transitioned into private investigation work specializing in marriage fraud, financial crimes, and complex deception cases. She was an intelligent-looking woman in her mid-40s with sharp, observant eyes and a direct, no-nonsense manner that immediately inspired confidence and trust. "I've handled numerous cases very similar to yours," she said, taking detailed notes as I carefully explained my situation and shared all the evidence I had gathered. "The behavioral pattern you're describing is extremely common among sophisticated marriage fraud perpetrators. They identify wealthy targets through careful research, court them with an intense romantic campaign, rush them into marriage, and then work systematically to access their finances before disappearing completely. The emotional and physical distance you've experienced since your wedding is actually a classic red flag in these cases," Detective Mitchell continued. "These criminals avoid genuine intimacy because it complicates their exit strategy and makes it more difficult for them to maintain the emotional detachment necessary to execute their fraudulent plans." "But Marcus seemed so sincere and authentic when we were dating," I protested, still struggling to accept the possibility that our entire relationship had been built on lies. "He was romantic, attentive, genuinely interested in my life, my family, my career, my hobbies. He seemed to really love me and want to build a future together." Detective Mitchell looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and professional understanding. "These individuals are highly skilled and sophisticated manipulators, Alina. They research their targets extensively, learning their interests, their backgrounds, their emotional vulnerabilities, their financial situations, and their personal histories. They essentially become whoever they think you need them to be." She pulled out a standard contract and set it on the desk between us. "I need you to understand that what we discover during this investigation might be very difficult and painful to accept. Are you emotionally prepared for the possibility that your entire relationship, from the very first moment you met, was built on carefully calculated deception?" I thought about the past 4 months of confusion, rejection, and self-doubt. I considered the cold stranger sharing my bed, the secret phone calls to his apparent real love, the mysterious business trips, and the complete transformation of his personality immediately following our wedding ceremony. Whatever the truth turned out to be, it couldn't possibly be worse than the uncertainty, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation I was currently experiencing. "I need to know the truth," I said firmly, my voice growing stronger with determination. "Whatever it takes, however painful it might be, I have to understand what's really happening in my own life." Detective Mitchell nodded approvingly and began outlining her comprehensive investigation plan. She would conduct thorough background checks on Marcus Thompson, search marriage records in multiple states, attempt to identify and locate Jessica through various databases, and investigate Marcus's claimed employment history and financial background using her extensive network of professional contacts. "One more thing," she said, reaching into her desk drawer and producing a small, sophisticated recording device. "If Marcus makes any admissions, reveals information about his activities, or makes threats of any kind, we need to have that evidence properly documented. Washington is a two-party consent state for telephone conversations, but you can legally record in-person conversations that take place in your own home without his knowledge or consent." As I left Detective Mitchell's office, the small recording device felt heavy and significant in my purse, like it represented a point of no return in my investigation. I was about to embark on a systematic investigation that would either save my marriage by revealing some innocent explanation for Marcus's behavior, or destroy it completely by confirming my worst fears about the man I had pledged to love and honor for the rest of my life. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was taking active control of my situation, instead of being a passive victim of Marcus's increasingly obvious manipulations and psychological games. That evening, I found myself watching Marcus across our elegant dining room table with entirely new eyes, studying his handsome face for any trace of authenticity or genuine emotion. He was making casual conversation about his supposedly busy day, complaining about demanding clients, and discussing his upcoming business travel plans, while I mechanically ate my dinner and responded with appropriate comments. Every word he spoke, every facial expression, every gesture, every moment of apparent normalcy now felt like an elaborate theatrical performance specifically designed to deceive me and maintain whatever fraudulent scheme he was operating. The man sitting across from me, sharing a meal in our beautifully furnished apartment, felt like a complete stranger wearing a mask of my husband's face. When Marcus excused himself to take what he claimed was an urgent phone call from a client in his home office, I discreetly activated the recording device and carefully positioned myself outside the closed door, my heart pounding with anxiety and anticipation as I prepared to eavesdrop on what I strongly suspected would be an intimate conversation with Jessica. "I know, sweetheart, I miss you desperately too." Marcus's voice carried clearly through the door, instantly taking on the tender, loving tone I hadn't heard him use since our honeymoon. "This whole complicated situation up here is taking longer than I originally expected, but I promise you it'll be completely finished soon, and we can finally be together permanently." I pressed closer to the door, straining to hear every word of what was clearly a romantic conversation with another woman, the woman he apparently considered his real wife and true love. "No, darling, she doesn't suspect anything at all," Marcus continued, his voice filled with confidence and satisfaction. "Elena's actually making this much easier than I anticipated by becoming increasingly distant and withdrawn herself. I think she's already planning to ask for a divorce, which would be absolutely perfect for our timeline and financial goals." The casual cruelty and calculated coldness in his voice made me feel physically sick to my stomach. He was discussing me like I was nothing more than a business obstacle, a problem to be solved, a target to be manipulated and discarded. "Once she files for divorce, I can immediately execute all the financial transfers we've been planning and be back in Phoenix permanently within just a few weeks," Marcus continued. The prenuptial agreement was absolutely brilliant in its design. She was so completely in love and trusting that she barely read the terms and conditions. She has no idea what she actually signed. I had to grip the doorframe tightly to prevent myself from collapsing as the full implications of his words hit me like a devastating blow. The prenuptial agreement that Marcus had insisted was necessary to protect both of our interests equally was actually a carefully crafted legal trap designed to rob me of my inheritance and financial security. If she initiates divorce proceedings within the first year of marriage, the prenup stipulates that she gets absolutely nothing from any assets I might have, but I automatically get 50% of everything she brought into the marriage, including the substantial inheritance from her father's successful environmental consulting business, Marcus explained with obvious satisfaction. The sophisticated nature of his deception was breathtaking and terrifying. He had manipulated me into signing away my own financial future while making me believe I was protecting myself and our shared interests. Every aspect of our relationship, from our supposedly chance meeting to our romantic courtship to our beautiful wedding ceremony, had been carefully orchestrated to put me in the perfect position to be financially devastated. "I love you too, Jessica, more than anything in the world," Marcus said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper that conveyed more genuine emotion than he had ever shown me. "Tell me everything about your day, darling. How was the art gallery opening? Did the new exhibition get positive reviews?" For the next 25 minutes, I stood frozen outside the door, listening to Marcus have exactly the kind of loving, attentive, genuinely interested conversation that I had desperately craved from him throughout our marriage. He asked detailed questions about Jessica's work as an art curator in Phoenix, remembered specific information about her colleagues and projects, expressed enthusiasm about her professional successes, and made romantic plans for their upcoming weekend together. He was everything to Jessica that he had completely refused to be to me: loving, supportive, emotionally present, physically affectionate, and genuinely invested in her happiness and well-being. The contrast was so stark and painful that I felt like I was discovering that my husband had been replaced by an alien imposter, except that the imposter was actually showing me who Marcus really was when he thought no one was watching. When he finally ended the call with elaborate expressions of love and promises to see Jessica soon, I quietly crept back to the living room and turned off the recording device, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I processed everything I had learned. Marcus hadn't just been having a simple extramarital affair behind my back. He had orchestrated an incredibly sophisticated fraud, specifically designed to steal my inheritance, while maintaining what was clearly his real-life and genuine marriage in Phoenix. The next morning, while Marcus was supposedly attending meetings with clients in downtown Seattle, Detective Mitchell called me with her preliminary findings, and her news was even worse than I had feared. "I have some very significant updates for you," she said, her professional tone unable to completely mask her obvious concern. "The bad news is that Marcus Thompson legally married Jessica Rivera in Phoenix, Arizona, exactly 14 months ago, which was 4 months before he even met you at Pike Place Market. Their marriage is fully documented, legally valid, and registered with all appropriate state and federal authorities." My absolute worst fears were being confirmed in the most devastating way possible, but Detective Mitchell wasn't finished delivering bad news. The additional bad news is that Marcus committed federal bigamy when he married you, which means your marriage certificate is technically invalid, and your wedding ceremony was essentially a fraudulent performance designed to facilitate his criminal scheme. She continued, "However, the good news is that this makes your legal case extremely strong and straightforward. The recording you made last night provides clear evidence of intent to commit marriage fraud, financial fraud, and conspiracy to steal your inheritance," Detective Mitchell explained. "Combined with the documentary evidence of his existing marriage to Jessica, we have more than enough proof to file serious federal criminal charges and completely invalidate your prenuptial agreement based on fraud, misrepresentation, and criminal activity." "What happens next in this process?" I asked, feeling strangely calm despite the magnitude of what I was learning about my supposedly loving husband. "Now we build an absolutely airtight criminal case against Marcus," Detective Mitchell said with obvious satisfaction. "Based on the conversation you recorded last night, Marcus is planning to access your inheritance very soon, probably within the next few weeks. We need to catch him in the actual act of attempting to steal your money while simultaneously gathering additional evidence of his ongoing criminal enterprise." Over the next 2 intensive weeks, Detective Mitchell's investigation revealed that Marcus's deception was far more extensive and sophisticated than even she had initially suspected. He wasn't just a simple bigamist or opportunistic marriage fraud perpetrator. He was apparently part of a larger criminal organization that had been systematically targeting wealthy women across multiple states for several years. We've now identified at least 6 other victims in different states who married men matching Marcus's exact physical description and using very similar methodologies, Detective Mitchell explained during our strategy meeting at Robert Chen's law office. "Same basic approach every single time. Extensive background research on wealthy targets, whirlwind romantic courtships, rushed marriages, systematic access to finances, and then complete disappearance once the money has been transferred. We believe Marcus and Jessica work as a highly effective criminal team," she continued, spreading surveillance photographs across the conference table. "While Marcus is executing his fraudulent marriage schemes in various cities, Jessica maintains their real household in Phoenix and provides emotional support and logistical assistance for his criminal activities." The surveillance photos she showed me were emotionally devastating to examine. Marcus and Jessica at expensive restaurants throughout Phoenix, clearly comfortable and deeply in love. Marcus entering and leaving a beautiful house that was obviously their shared marital home. Jessica waiting in their car while Marcus conducted business at various banks and financial institutions, apparently using forged documents and fraudulent authorizations. Marcus has been systematically using your marriage certificate and carefully forged financial documents to establish himself as your legal husband with multiple banking institutions, Robert explained, pointing to specific evidence in the growing case file. "His plan appears to be to drain these newly established accounts all at once, then manipulate you into filing for divorce under the terms of your fraudulent prenuptial agreement. The scheme is designed so that he can claim you were emotionally unstable, sexually unresponsive, or unwilling to work on your marriage problems, Detective Mitchell added. He would then use your divorce filing as justification for accessing the financial settlements specified in your prenup, which would give him legal access to your inheritance even after your marriage was dissolved. How is it possible that I haven't noticed money missing from my existing accounts? I asked, still struggling to understand the full scope of his financial deception. Detective Mitchell opened yet another file folder filled with financial documents and bank records. Marcus has been far more sophisticated in his approach than simply stealing from your current accounts, which would immediately trigger fraud alerts and draw unwanted attention to his activities. Instead, he's been establishing entirely new financial products using your social security number, your marriage certificate, and forged authorization documents, she continued. He secured multiple lines of credit against your father's business assets and your inheritance, essentially creating a shadow financial identity that he can liquidate completely without you ever knowing the accounts existed until it's too late to recover the money. The scope and sophistication of Marcus's deception was absolutely breathtaking and terrifying. He had apparently been planning this elaborate scheme for many months, possibly even before our supposedly chance encounter at Pike Place Market. Every romantic gesture during our courtship, every declaration of love, every moment of apparent happiness and genuine connection had been carefully calculated to manipulate me into the perfect position to be financially destroyed. There's something else you need to know, Detective Mitchell said, her expression becoming even more grave as she opened what appeared to be the final file folder in her extensive investigation. We've discovered additional information about Marcus and Jessica's relationship that makes this case even more disturbing and complex than we initially realized. She pulled out a series of official documents and photographs, arranging them carefully on the conference table where I could see them clearly. Jessica Rivera isn't just Marcus's criminal accomplice or even his legitimate wife. According to birth records and family genealogy databases, Jessica Rivera was born Jessica Marie Thompson. She's Marcus's biological sister. The room seemed to spin around me as this new information hit me like a physical assault. The intimate phone calls I had overheard, the romantic photographs, the passionate text messages declaring eternal love, it was all part of an incestuous criminal partnership that made my skin crawl with revulsion and horror. The romantic relationship they appear to have is actually part of their criminal methodology, Detective Mitchell explained, her voice carefully professional despite the disturbing nature of what she was revealing. They present themselves as a married couple to establish legitimacy and avoid suspicion, while actually operating a sophisticated marriage fraud enterprise that has been targeting wealthy women for at least 7 years. They've perfected a system where Marcus identifies and courts wealthy targets in various cities, while Jessica maintains their base of operations and provides logistical support, she continued. The apparent love affair between them is partially genuine, but primarily serves as cover for their criminal activities and helps them maintain the emotional detachment necessary to systematically destroy their victims' lives. Robert Chen leaned forward, his expression reflecting years of experience with complex criminal cases. Elena, what we have here is far more than simple bigamy or marriage fraud. This is evidence of an ongoing criminal conspiracy involving mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, and potentially racketeering charges under federal organized crime statutes. Marcus and Jessica have created false identities, forged government documents, established fraudulent financial accounts across multiple states, and systematically stolen millions of dollars from numerous victims over many years, he continued. This isn't just about recovering your inheritance or dissolving your marriage. This is about stopping a major criminal enterprise and ensuring that these people can never victimize anyone else. Detective Mitchell nodded in agreement. We have enough evidence to completely destroy both Marcus and Jessica, but we need to catch Marcus in the actual act of accessing your funds to make our case absolutely bulletproof and ensure maximum criminal penalties. What exactly do you need me to do? I asked, feeling a strange mixture of determination and fear as I contemplated actively participating in the investigation that would bring down my fraudulent husband. We're going to give Marcus exactly what he thinks he wants, Detective Mitchell replied with obvious satisfaction. You're going to file for divorce, just as Marcus has been hoping and planning for, but instead of allowing him to use his fraudulent prenuptial agreement to steal your inheritance, we're going to use his greed and overconfidence to trap him. The plan they outlined was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential effectiveness. I would file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences and emotional incompatibility, playing the role of the heartbroken, confused wife who couldn't handle the lack of intimacy and connection in our marriage. Marcus would undoubtedly feel confident that his elaborate scheme was proceeding exactly as planned, and he would move quickly to access the various financial accounts he had established using my identity and marriage certificate. Federal agents would be positioned at multiple banks and financial institutions throughout Seattle and Phoenix, ready to arrest Marcus the moment he attempted to transfer or withdraw the fraudulent funds. Additional agents would simultaneously arrest Jessica in Phoenix, dismantling their entire criminal operation in a coordinated law enforcement action. "Are you emotionally prepared for what comes next?" Robert asked, his tone serious and concerned. "Once we set this plan in motion, there will be no going back. Marcus will be arrested on federal charges, and the truth about your marriage will become public record. The media attention could be significant, given the unusual nature of the case." I thought about the past 5 months of lies, manipulation, and emotional abuse. I considered the elaborate deception that had turned what should have been the happiest time of my life into a nightmare of confusion and self-doubt. I reflected on my father's business legacy being used as bait in a criminal scheme, and on the other victims who had suffered similar devastation at the hands of these sophisticated predators. "I'm absolutely ready," I said firmly, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Let's end this charade once and for all and make sure these criminals can never hurt anyone else." The King County Superior Courthouse was bustling with its usual activity on the crisp December morning when I filed for divorce, but I felt strangely calm and focused as I walked up the courthouse steps with Robert Chen beside me. Detective Mitchell had positioned federal agents throughout Seattle and Phoenix, all of them ready to move the moment Marcus took the bait and attempted to access the fraudulent accounts. I had served Marcus with the divorce papers the previous evening, delivering what I believed would be the performance of my lifetime as I played the part of the devastated wife who could no longer handle the emotional distance and lack of physical intimacy in our marriage. His reaction had been absolutely perfect. Surprise, hurt, disappointment, and then resigned acceptance that seemed completely genuine, but which I now recognized as carefully calculated manipulation. "I'm so sorry it's come to this, Alina," he had said, pulling me into what I now understood was a completely false embrace designed to reinforce his image as a caring but misunderstood husband. "I know I haven't been the husband you needed or deserved. Maybe this separation will give us both the space and time we need to figure out what we want from our relationship and our future together." The recording device hidden in my jacket had captured every single lying word, adding to the mountain of evidence that would soon destroy him completely. Now, as Robert efficiently filed the legal paperwork that would officially dissolve my fraudulent marriage, my phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Mitchell. "Subject is moving. Entered First National Bank downtown with multiple financial documents and identification. Federal agents in position at all locations. This should be over very soon." My heart began racing as I imagined Marcus confidently walking into the bank, probably feeling completely secure that his elaborate plan had worked exactly as intended. He undoubtedly believed he was about to walk away with my entire inheritance while leaving me with nothing but a fraudulent prenuptial agreement and a completely shattered life. "The paperwork is officially filed," Robert said, handing me copies of the divorce documents along with additional legal papers I would need for the criminal proceedings. "According to Washington state law, Marcus has 20 days to respond to your divorce petition, but based on what Detective Mitchell has planned, I seriously doubt he'll ever get the opportunity." My phone buzzed again with another update. "Package delivered successfully. Primary subject in federal custody. Secondary subject arrested simultaneously in Phoenix. You can go home now, Elena. It's finally over." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath of the crisp Seattle air, feeling like I could breathe freely for the first time in months. The man who had systematically manipulated and deceived me, who had planned to rob me of everything my father had worked to build, who had turned my dreams of love and marriage into a nightmare of lies and financial fraud, was finally facing the consequences of his extensive criminal activities. The federal arraignment hearing was held in the imposing United States District Court building 2 weeks later, and I sat in the public gallery watching as Marcus and Jessica were led into the courtroom wearing orange jail jumpsuits and heavy shackles around their wrists and ankles. Marcus's confident, sophisticated demeanor had completely crumbled during his time in federal custody. His face was pale and drawn, his expensive haircut had grown out, and he kept looking around the courtroom with obvious panic and disbelief, as if he couldn't accept where his criminal activities had ultimately led him. The defendants, Marcus James Thompson and Jessica Marie Thompson, are charged with conspiracy to commit mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, bigamy, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise, the federal prosecutor announced in a strong, clear voice that carried throughout the packed courtroom. The government alleges that the defendants operated a sophisticated criminal organization targeting wealthy women across multiple states for fraudulent marriages, specifically designed to steal their assets and destroy their financial security. When Marcus's desperate eyes found mine across the crowded courtroom, I saw the exact moment he realized that I had known about his criminal scheme all along, that I had been actively investigating him, and that I had played a crucial role in his downfall. The shock and disbelief on his face quickly transformed into something approaching terror as the full weight of his legal situation became clear to him. "Your Honor," Marcus's court-appointed federal public defender said, rising from his seat with obvious reluctance, "my client maintains his complete innocence of all charges and respectfully requests that the court consider setting reasonable bail so that he can properly assist in his defense." The federal prosecutor immediately stood to respond. "Your Honor, Mr. Thompson is an extreme flight risk who has demonstrated a consistent pattern of creating false identities, fraudulent relationships, and deceptive financial arrangements across multiple jurisdictions. The government has evidence that the defendants have access to significant amounts of stolen money hidden in various accounts, and we believe they would immediately flee the country if released. The government strongly requests that both defendants be held without bail pending trial." Jessica sat silently beside Marcus throughout the hearing, tears streaming down her face as she began to understand that their years of criminal success had finally come to an end. The intimate phone calls, the romantic photographs, the elaborate lifestyle they had built on the suffering of their victims. It was all evidence now, proof of a disturbing criminal conspiracy that would result in lengthy federal prison sentences for both of them. The federal judge's voice was stern and uncompromising as he delivered his ruling on the bail question. The evidence presented by the government suggests a highly sophisticated criminal enterprise that poses a continued and significant danger to the community. Both defendants have demonstrated a pattern of deception, fraud, and manipulation that makes them unsuitable candidates for pretrial release. Both defendants will be remanded to federal custody pending trial. As the federal marshals led Marcus away in shackles, he turned to look back at me one final time, his face displaying a mixture of defeat, rage, and complete disbelief that his supposedly perfect criminal scheme had led to his total destruction. The confident, charming man who had swept me off my feet at Pike Place Market had been revealed as a sophisticated predator who had finally chosen the wrong victim. The federal trial took place 8 months later, and the evidence presented by prosecutors was so overwhelming and comprehensive that Marcus's defense team eventually advised him to negotiate a plea agreement rather than risk even harsher sentences at trial. The investigation had uncovered the full scope of Marcus and Jessica's criminal enterprise, revealing that they had systematically targeted and victimized wealthy women across 12 different states over a period of 7 years. Marcus Thompson received a federal sentence of 18 years in prison for his leadership role in the marriage fraud conspiracy, while Jessica Thompson received 12 years for her participation as a co-conspirator and accomplice. The investigation revealed that they had stolen approximately $4.2 million from their various victims, money that was largely recovered from hidden accounts and returned to the women whose lives they had devastated. Their criminal enterprise completely collapsed when their convictions inspired other victims to come forward and seek justice for their own experiences with the siblings' sophisticated manipulation and fraud. Marcus's reputation was permanently destroyed when extensive media coverage made him infamous as one of the most calculating and destructive marriage predators in recent federal court history, ensuring that he would never again be able to manipulate vulnerable women seeking genuine love and companionship. The civil lawsuit I filed against Marcus and Jessica resulted in a substantial financial judgment that allowed me to recover not only my inheritance, but also additional damages for the emotional distress and psychological trauma they had caused. My father's business legacy was protected and preserved, and I was able to use some of the recovered funds to establish a foundation, providing legal assistance to other victims of marriage fraud and romance scams. I celebrated my legal victory quietly but meaningfully, sharing dinner with my family and closest friends who had provided unwavering support throughout the investigation, trial, and recovery process. My mother, who had initially been charmed by Marcus's sophisticated demeanor and apparent devotion to me, apologized repeatedly for not recognizing the signs of deception that now seemed so obvious in retrospect. Looking back on my journey from confused and manipulated newlywed to determined survivor and advocate for other victims, I realized that Marcus's betrayal, as devastating and traumatic as it had been, had ultimately taught me to trust my instincts, fight for myself when something feels fundamentally wrong, and never allow anyone to gaslight me into doubting my own perceptions and experiences. The justice I had sought wasn't just about punishing Marcus and Jessica for their crimes against me, though their lengthy prison sentences certainly provided a sense of satisfaction and closure. More importantly, it was about reclaiming my power and agency, protecting my family's legacy, and ensuring that no other woman would fall victim to their elaborate lies and sophisticated manipulation. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I received a letter from him in federal prison, attempting to apologize for his actions and claiming that he had genuinely cared for me despite the criminal nature of our relationship. I threw the letter away without finishing it, recognizing it as just another attempt at manipulation from a man who had never shown me a moment of genuine emotion or authentic connection. I eventually met and married a wonderful man named David, a fellow environmental consultant who shared my passion for protecting the natural world and building a better future for coming generations. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally over many months, built on mutual respect, genuine compatibility, and authentic emotional connection, rather than the artificial intensity and manufactured romance that had characterized my disastrous experience with Marcus. David knew about my past experiences with marriage fraud, and he was patient and understanding as I worked through the trust issues and emotional scars left by Marcus's elaborate deception. He encouraged me to continue my advocacy work with other victims and supported my efforts to raise awareness about the sophisticated tactics used by romance scammers and marriage fraud perpetrators. On our wedding day, surrounded by family and friends who had supported me through the darkest period of my life, I felt genuine happiness and optimism for the first time since those early days with Marcus when I had believed I was living in a fairy tale. The difference was that this time, my happiness was based on authentic love, honest communication, and genuine partnership, rather than carefully calculated manipulation designed to facilitate a criminal scheme. Marcus Thompson remains incarcerated in federal prison, where he will likely spend the next 15 years of his life paying for his crimes against me and numerous other victims. Jessica Thompson was released after serving 8 years of her sentence and now lives under court supervision, prohibited from accessing the internet or social media, and required to undergo regular psychological counseling as part of her parole conditions. The foundation I established has helped more than 100 victims of marriage fraud and romance scams recover stolen money, obtain legal representation, and rebuild their lives after experiencing similar betrayals. The work has been emotionally challenging, but deeply rewarding, allowing me to transform my painful experience into something that helps protect other vulnerable women from sophisticated predators like Marcus. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had never met Marcus Thompson, if I had never experienced the devastating betrayal of discovering that my marriage was built entirely on lies and criminal deception. But ultimately, I've come to believe that surviving his elaborate fraud made me stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I would have been otherwise. The experience taught me that my instincts and perceptions are valid and reliable, even when sophisticated manipulators try to convince me otherwise. It showed me the importance of thorough investigation and careful verification when something feels wrong, rather than simply accepting explanations that sound plausible but don't match observed behavior. Most importantly, it demonstrated that even the most elaborate criminal schemes can be defeated when victims refuse to remain silent and passive, when they fight back with determination and strategic thinking, and when they seek help from qualified professionals who have experience dealing with sophisticated fraud and deception. Marcus Thompson thought he had found the perfect victim in me, wealthy, trusting, eager for love and companionship, and isolated enough to be manipulated without interference from protective family members or suspicious friends. What he discovered instead was that he had chosen someone who would not only expose his criminal activities, but would dedicate years of her life to ensuring that he and others like him faced the full consequences of their actions. The man who believed he could manipulate me into financial ruin learned that his supposedly perfect scheme had led to his own complete destruction, and that sometimes the hunters become the hunted when they underestimate the strength and determination of their intended victims. In the end, justice was not only served, but became the foundation for protecting countless other women from experiencing similar devastation at the hands of sophisticated marriage fraud predators.